Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks. And today I've got some good old light tank gameplay coming for you on the channel. Light tank's something that you don't really see too much as often in the matchmaker these days, especially if you're playing something like ranked. I really feel that with the drop-off in the amount of self-propelled guns that play the game, the kind of role of the light tank is starting to shift. And while you can either go one of two ways. One is this kind of like all full-in scout mode for a light tank. You know, when you're using like exhaust systems to be able to improve your camera rating, using commander's vision systems to be able to allow you to see through bushes and to see vehicles that are moving. You probably combine that with coated optics, vents, those kind of things. You fully boost up your ability to stay hidden and also to be able to spot. And that is because now it's not really enough to just spot your opponents at decent distances and to allow your artillery to bombard them one by one. Now quite often what you're having to do in a light tank instead is get either dangerously close to your opponent or be able to spot them from locations that they really didn't expect you to be able to see them from to still be effective. Because most of the damage, or should I say spotting, that you're able to achieve inside a game is really from your medium tanks or your tank destroyers or sometimes your heavies when they find themselves in decent situations. And here we can see the tank destroyer gun line, the Guerrilla and the Object 268 at the back, unable to get a hit into the 430U or into the Manticore who was spotted early on in this battle. Now today I'm playing in the AMX 13105 and you're going to see me have an incredibly awkward game, at least for the first part of the battle. And that's because light tanks quite often need to stay alive until the latter part of the battle where they have room to breathe. Think about it like this. Any tank that is focused on using its camo rating to be able to avoid vision from the enemy team and to use its view range to be able to try and make plays or use its mobility to be able to keep pace against its opponents will do better when the concentration of tanks on the map starts to dwindle. Now that's kind of in conflict to what's happening in ranked, however, and that is that in ranked, because there are only 10 tanks in the game and the fact there are no self-propelled guns, well, you do have more room to play on the map. There's less tanks for you to be able to spot when you're in those positions, and there's less tanks on your team to be able to cover your vision. So you kind of want to have a lot of tanks inside the game, but you also kind of want to wait till the latter part where you have an opportunity to actually make consistent plays that are more calculated and aren't just so much you just hoping that somebody's not going to be in a position to be able to spot you, or that at least when you do get spotted there aren't 3 or 4 tanks left on the enemy team to be able to remove all of your hit points. So I'm going to be playing in the AMX 13105 here, and I don't have many of the field mods on this vehicle yet. I do not have a second equipment setup, although I think I'm pretty close to being able to get it. So the equipment that you see me using in the AMX 13105 is kind of a full damagey build. I'm using vents with vertical stabilizers and a rotation device. This improves the relatively poor traverse speeds of the vehicle, but more importantly, it means that I can get 3 rounds out quick, and that's what I love to do in my AMX 13105. I love to fire on the move, and by having that increased dispersion when moving value and also when turning the hull and the turret 30% because your rotation device is stacking with your vertical stabilizers, that really allows you to be able to engage cleanly on the move. Now of course it'd be way better if I was using bounty equipment or bond equipment on this tank. That really goes without saying. The way that I like to play the 13105 is to think that I am a better damage dealing light tank than any other light tank in the game. There's no light tank that has an autoloader that is this voracious with 390 damage and 3 rounds to boot. This is kind of like a baby Bat-Chat. And one of the things that I love about the 13105 as well is, unlike the Bat-Chat, which I believe gets 6 degrees of gun depression, the 13105 gets 8, which actually makes you way more flexible on a ridgeline. So I'm trying to let my team know that there's most likely a Progetto or a 13105, although I do tell them it's just a Progetto in the bush. I'm hoping that maybe the Jagdpanzer E100 or the 2 Leopards over there are going to be able to engage, but unfortunately for me it looks like the Jagdpanzer E100 has got bored of sitting at the back of the map and wants to shove forwards. None of the 2 glass cannon snipey medium tanks are really seeming to be interested in blind firing the bush, so instead I'm just going to focus on maybe trying to transition into the town in a game that is now rapidly accelerating. We're 5 minutes into the round, where hopefully I'm going to be able to make a play there. I want to try and break the stalemate, and maybe with my team pushing through the town, I can be that kind of auto-loading advantage to help them out. So back to the firepower capabilities of this vehicle. And it's actually kind of quite nice to have a smaller magazine than the Batchat, but also because sometimes you don't need those extra 2 rounds in the Batchat. Sure, it's nice for when you're getting to shoot at something that's being caught out completely out in the open, or alternatively, if you're just playing against a tank that you've managed to track and really lock down. But more often than not in the Batchat, I want to fire like 1 round, 2 rounds, 3 rounds, and then I want to reload. And the fact that this one reloads in substantially less time at 27 seconds compared to the Batchat, which I presume has got about 40 or 45, really does help out the 13105 for being more reactionary. So this is an absolute fail coming up in this game. I let the Object 430U know that I'm going to help him. But unfortunately for me, the 60 TP is actually facing my location. And I can't really come around this corner here to be able to help out the 430U. And you can see I'm trying to put my shots into the lower plate. My regular rounds are bouncing, and now I'm getting lit up by a Progetto at the back. And I feel terrible in this scenario. Where I thought we were going to be able to make an ambush play, and you can see I'm still trying to help out that 430U there. It just didn't work out, because really I should have loaded gold in that situation. I should have had those high explosive anti-tank rounds ready for the lower plate of the 60 TP, but I did expect that player to turn round and try to deal with the 430U threat. So maybe I made a bit of a misplay that I kind of engaged a little too quickly, and I should have waited for the 60 TP to commit to the 430U before I in turn then unloaded on them. Although, as we could see, the reticle was actually green for the lower plate there, so I guess I got a poor pen roll of 234. That is definitely one of the worst things about your light tanks. I've said this a few times on the channel, and I'll say it again because I don't think there's enough people who know about it. But Tier 10 light tanks are the only class in the game that get such huge shell drop-off over distances. Oh man, that's why I love the 13105. You're fast, you're sneaky to get into position, you've got better camera rating than the Batchat. Didn't get spotted by the FV405, had the mobility to be able to avoid the crossfire from the Progetto. We managed to shut down the 60 TP, and now we're just using this position to re-stealth and to hopefully continue on. But yeah, light tanks, APCR rounds, lose a tremendous amount of penetration over distance. They're losing 25% of their initial penetration, meaning that at 500 meters, a 13105 has probably only got about 190 or 185 millimeters of penetration, which is absolutely horrendous. You're talking about having kind of tier 7 or possibly poor tier 8 pen on a tier 10 tank. None of the other classes in the game get that. And that's because Wargaming was so terrified about light tanks and not having them be these kind of all-purpose new medium tanks when they incorporated them into the game. Are they the most competitive class in the game? I think that might be a bit of a bold statement. I think that they do well because they compete against each other, and the matchmaker forces light tanks to play against light tanks. And so they don't need to actually be able to compete against the other vehicles, so to say, because all they really have to do is outplay the enemy light tank and then use that to snowball the game. And I also think that the reason why a vehicle like this does well is because there are tanks like the Rheinmetall, Panzerwagen, and Sheridan in the game, which this one undoubtedly does absolutely smash. Right, looking for a shell there on the Leopard, unsure whether we hit the tier 10 German medium tank. And I'm just hoping that they're going to be able to get lit up here, but it doesn't seem to be working out. Alright, so we're 9 minutes nearly into the game now, and this has just been a horrific result for a light tank. 32 spotting, 1,200 damage. No matter how hard I tried, I could never really find a situation where it would work out for this vehicle. Sure, I did paltry amounts of support damage against the medium tanks on the eastern flank, and I held them from advancing. Sure, I put in one shot against the 121, and even with best intentions, I just couldn't help out the 430U on my team to be able to deal with that 60 TP. And until I really went in and assassinated that 60 TP, I just don't really feel as if I had the impact that I needed. The Manticore on my team actually says, QB, we lose game and you in city? Okay, mate, you know what? You called me out, obviously. You know what, then? Let's do it. 5 minutes left. We've finally got room to breathe, and our light tank comes online in this kind of a scenario. We're down by 1,000 hit points. We're equal on tanks, and what I need to do in my 13105 right now is try to progress. Looks like I might have hit that Leopard earlier on, and that means that I get to shut them down. I'm looking for the extra shot on the T-110E3, but I realize I'm not going to be able to handle that tank. So now I'm going to start to load high explosive anti-tank rounds on this vehicle, and they don't suffer from the drop-off in penetration over distance at all. They have 280 irrelevant if you hit your opponent, or you heat your opponent from 1 meter or 500 meters. So it'll be very useful for engaging this T-110E3. But I totally agree with this Manticore. I just haven't really found an opportunity to get into this round. A lot of that will be because I haven't got the second set of equipment. And on a map like this, I really wouldn't play like a damage dealer in a 13105. I should have used exhaust system, I should have used commander's vision system, and probably I should have used vents or coated optics on the vehicle to be able to really enable me to be the pure scout. But when I'm playing against vehicles like an EBR and a Manticore, and I've got 2 Manticores on my team, maybe it's also sometimes the 13105's role to be the extra damage dealer. So I'm communicating with my team, telling them to pre-aim for me, please. And then hopefully we'll see whether the artillery is going to help us out. The artillery is actually saying they've clicked on the B0 area, which was for me, and I highlight the T-110E3, and then this, ladies and gents, is going to be a shell from the heavens, as far as I can tell. Come on, Artie. Oh yeah, 258. Not quite as much as I might have wanted, but considering that I believe he hit the E3 for 1,078 before that shot, wow. You know, thank you, Artie, for helping me out. Now you'll see that I actually went out back round the corner while the T-110E3 was stunned, because when he's stunned, he's got 25% less view range, and when he's got 25% less view range, he's never going to be able to see me here. Now, I'm kind of worried about all-inning that T-110E3, because if he hits me with an HE shell, I'm gone. And so I'm trying to look for the FV405 and the Progetto who's up on the slope. But there we go, our third kill of the game now against the 430U. The FV405 spots me, and I instantly decide to reload. As a rule of thumb in this tank, unlike the Bat Chat, if I feel like I'm not going to fire in the next 5 or 10 seconds, I'm going to reload. Because having 3 shells is just so much better than 2 or 1, and considering our reload is so short anyway, we can make it work. Alright, so our 268 is advancing, the FV405 is on the ridgeline, and I'm looking for shots into the Tier 10 British tank destroyer. There's one, and this is where double stacking vert stabs and a rotation device feels so good. But unfortunately, because I don't have the aiming device on this tank, it could be a little bit awkward. So I decide to engage that T-110E3, and even though I've got 30% better dispersion on the move, unfortunately my shell goes a little high, and I whiff the shell that I thought was a clean kill into the T-110E3. Luckily for me, their E3 focuses the Gorilla, and my Object 268 manages to finish them off. I get a little bit more assistance damage on the FV4005. I'm calling in for fire on them, but considering that I know that there's 2 minutes left on this game, what I'm doing right now is I'm making sure that I'm going to go and focus out the Progetto 65, because we're not going to win this game via capping. The only way that I'm going to be able to carry this right now is by making sure I assassinate the Progetto and then somehow manage to get into position to deal with the T-110E4 and the FV405 as well with the Object 268, who is still pretty darn healthy, if not full health, in this game. Alright, so here we go, ladies and gents, boys and girls. We're hunting down a Tier 10 Italian medium tank. We're going to put, hopefully, 1 shell in. Oh, that one looked like it went through his turret, but okay. Second one in. Pressure moment. Will we hit this shot? Maybe the accuracy device would do better on this vehicle if I could get a firepower slot on the tank. However, I don't have that yet, and I feel like the rotation device is better unless you've got a bounty aiming device on a light tank, especially with the poor traverse speed on this vehicle. 3 tanks left on the enemy team. We're not quite sure what kind of hit points their T-110E4 is on, but this is where I want to be. We're spotting the FV405. We get spotted right now. Let the chips fall where they may. 1 shot clean into Ghost Flight and their FV405 on the enemy team. I come around the corner, spot the Progetto. I decide to give myself as much time to aim, shut down the Progetto as well there with our second kill in this mag, and the third one. Okay, come on, fully aim this one, make it clean. And even though it tried about as hard as it possibly could to miss that T-110E4, luckily the shell ran true into the back of the Tier 10 American tank destroyer, and luckily we at least managed to come alive at the end of this game. And that's quite often what your light tanks will be capable of. The worst kind of light tank, there's 2 kinds of worst light tanks. One, the light tank that doesn't actually try to get involved into the game at the beginning, and secondly, the light tank that gets a little too involved in the game and ends up dying early. Light tanks in the latter part of the game have the room to breathe, to be impactful, and it's usually where they can also come online. Nevertheless, I'm still not giving excuses for the fact that I just couldn't quite manage to get into this one. But honestly, a lot of it does come down to not having a second set of equipment. When you're playing a tank class that needs to be able to have different roles with its equipment loadouts, considering what map it gets onto, it just feels so torturous in this game, at least for me recently, to not have multiple equipment loadouts on my tank. When you get onto a map like this, which is primarily vision-based, it just feels horrendous to not be able to use the commander's vision system exhaust and maybe vents or coated optics. But if you were to use that setup and then you end up in what is meant to be the best damage dealing light tank, you get on one of those kind of maps like Ensk or Runeberg or Himmelsdorf or Paris, any of those kind of more close quarters maps, and then you're stuck trying to spot in an irrelevant situation, then you can't use the vehicle to its strengths where it's meant to be the best damage dealing light tank in the game. So I'm thoroughly looking forward to seeing what I'm able to achieve on this vehicle with my continued journey to unlock field mods, but at least we managed, even with a very poor spotting setup on this tank, to manage to still take this one down. So even though we kind of arrived late in this battle, we still had an alright result. First class medal for our 1129 base and a top gun and top damage on our team, which is always great when you're playing a light tank. Commiserations to the Progetto on the enemy team, had a good game as well, and probably could have got a little bit more lucky on me there. I did have to fire a lot of high explosive anti-tank rounds, which means that even with a premium count, we managed to lose a few credits in this one. So I guess what this game really shows is it's better late than never. But with a light tank, honestly, sometimes arriving a little bit late can really be in your advantage. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that's it for today. Really hope you enjoyed this very close game on the Ghost Town map. If you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.